The funniest thing about being an entrepreneur is that you can't be a good entrepreneur if you're not mad. You have to always have that ability or that courage to push yourself over the edge and then see what happens. In order to preserve capital, to pivot, I cut half the team and I was like, nope, I'm not doing this business anymore. It's not going to make money. I think the most important thing is that a lot of bosses, they are very bad at supporting their team because they're not understanding the juniors' problems fast. I made a huge mistake. My biggest mistake was...
Hi everyone, today I have Charlie with me. Charlie is the founder and CEO of UrbanMetry, a data analytics company based in Malaysia, providing geospatial and temporal data to help cities and governments make better decisions. They serve clients like Sime Darby, Sunway Property, and have also raised $2 million in USD in 2022, backed by top-tier ventures such as Monkey Ventures and 500 startups. In 2020, UrbanMetry was the only Malaysian company recognized as a tech pioneer by the World Economic Forum. Charlie lives in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia with her family, and she's also an active member of the World Economic Forum's Global Commission for Nature Positive Cities and the Davos Alliance.
In this conversation, we dive into why you need to kind of be crazy to consider entrepreneurship. Pivots from B2C to VR before going all in on government and B2B sales. How she built one of the leading comprehensive data sets for cities in Southeast Asia, leveraging sales frameworks to secure enterprise relationships, how she leads as a solo founder and manages stress and family life, and much more. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did.
Thanks for being here, Charlie.
Most welcome, Eric. Nice to meet you.
So apart from the typical corporate introductions, how do you view yourself within and outside of business?
You've just done my accolade, so thanks so much for doing that. Generally, people know me as a benevolent tyrant, maybe. I'm also a little bit of a drinker. I guess that's the only thing people do remember from a lady career person. I'm a fan of music. I'm a fan of art. Those are the usual vices, I think, for myself. Yeah, and I spend too little time with my kids and not enough time with my parents, but that's the life of an entrepreneur.
Just to warm us up, I think before this, if there was one thing that you wanted to leave people with, it was don't do it, right? If someone wants to go into startups, don't do it. So I'm just wondering what you meant by that and who do you think entrepreneurship really is for?
Yeah, I was reflecting about this a little bit in the past few months, and I realized that entrepreneurs are a little bit like an artist. So I personally am a fan of the arts. I like a lot of art. I try to play music. And I realized that this journey of mine as an entrepreneur is very similar to being an artist. And really, you can't... The funniest thing about being an entrepreneur is that you can't be a good entrepreneur if you're not mad. It's a bit of a, not mad scientist, but you have to always have that ability or that courage to push yourself over the edge and then see what happens. So it's a constant self-discovery where you take immense amount of risk just to discover another thing about yourself and your team and what the world, I guess, is capable of. People don't tell you this. They all tell you all this like nice and dandy and we have this like nice open bar at the VC. But it's not at all. Like it is literally taking risks all day, every day. And yeah, and the worst part is that it's very addictive. You almost can't stop yourself from doing the next risky thing. So the funniest thing is that UrbanMetry is in the risk business. So we are there to inform our clients and quantify the risk for them so then they can make better informed decisions. And that theoretically lowers down the risk that they're taking in business. But myself as an entrepreneur, it is like all day, every day risk taking. Yeah. If you are not mad, don't do it.
That's really interesting and a good warning for those interested who haven't taken the lead yet.
I find it very strange because I saw now that there are like these courses to be like a founder or like courses to become a tech founder in like leading universities with a certificate and all. It always makes me like crack up because it's like, you can't teach this.
Cool. In my 4 years of studying finance and HR and psychology, I've never sold anything because of school. Like it always has to come because of my own ambitions, like outside of school. And I wonder why business schools don't teach that. Maybe it's time to rethink their business models. Any kind of interesting discoveries you've made in the past 10 years of building UrbanMetry?
Might be counterintuitive. While we think like this, whatever that entrepreneurs do cannot be learned, everything can be engineered. So it is interesting because while you think that whatever you do is like the first of its kind, is so amazing, blah, 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 somebody else has thought about it. I can tell you that for sure. Like, I think 10 ideas I hear, maybe 9.8 I've heard it before. So don't think that you have the most fantastic way of doing something. Somebody else somewhere has done it before, and it is just a lot cheaper to learn from other people than you yourself putting money in and learning it your way. I think you can run experiments, but if you can build off other people's experiments, it is just so much cheaper. So try not to think that you are a unicorn. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. You can work very hard at solving, making the cogs work, and then your machine will start turning. And a lot of it is resilience. So not almost like very little of it is, I had this brilliant idea. I'm sorry. It is not. And so I think that's one thing that I've learned. One is cheaper to learn from other people and then build off other people's knowledge. Not to say that you can't experiment. The funny thing is that you have to experiment, but it's just that where do you start the experimentation and deciding what is it that you are doing differently that could yield a different result. I think that is important.
I think we'll dive into some of your own personal experiments as well as, some of the experiments you've taken from other people's experiences. But maybe I'll just move into some of your early experiences. You've been building UrbanMetry for the past 10 years. Could you just give a brief overview of what it does, and if you're comfortable sharing some of the revenues, employees, growth figures as well?
Yeah, UrbanMetry is a city data company. So we collect, we clean, and we restructure a lot of public and privately procured data. And with the layers of data, so we now have 50 plus layers of city data. So city data includes things like where the humans go during the day, where your water pipes are, how your buses run, how frequent, where the housing is, which is like the layer that we started off with was housing, like where are the houses and how much do they cost. So that was our first entry point. And then we realized that was not enough to understand why we pay so much for so you go down a rabbit hole, right? Why do people pay so much for this per square foot here versus another? Sometimes people think of it as a fact. No, there are a lot of factors that goes into it. How people price. A lot of it has to do with the banks, actually. Macro, micro. We started layering, and then now we have this giant database that we use for everything that you want to physically put on the city, or virtually put on the city if you want to think about it that way. But I think in the virtual world, who can beat Google and Facebook at this point, right? We have the advantage on the physical stuff. So anything that's physically in the city, we have a moat and a big advantage. And largely, I'm ashamed to say this, is because competition is the government. So I can move slightly faster. I'm a little bit more nimble. I'm not succumb to a budget cycle. So yeah, not so proud of it, but really they are. And the only one I can't win against is Singapore government, right? That's why I don't even bother. I don't even bother to go to Singapore because the government does everything, right? But everywhere else, thankfully, not everybody's Singapore.
And whatever layers you've been talking about, would that be considered what you call a geographic information system?
Geospatial data.
GIS, geospatial.
Yeah, geospatial data. But I think the funniest thing is that people think that, this thing should be free. And then they start to realize, how come the government doesn't have it? How come the government doesn't even know where my land title ends? Why is it in paper? Why do we not know where all our bus stops are? Why? They start to question these things because actually the physical space is very hard. A little bit, the analogy I would use is like AI, right? To build a robot, we always thought about robot as in that moving thing, right? That is a zillion times harder to build. Anything physically moving is a zillion times harder to build than, I'm not saying ChatGPT is not hard to build. No, I'm not saying LLMs is not hard to build. It is, but the physical robot that actually does a lifting thing, it's a lot harder. Very similar types of challenge. You're trying to digitize the physical world. It's a lot harder than digitizing your sales. That's digital to digital. It's like writing to writing, right? But like when you are physically trying to digitize something, it's very hard.
Yeah. I was just speaking to a robotics founder, and I think he's taking a few years before even launching his first product to market, even though there's been a lot of trials. Going back to your journey before starting UrbanMetry, you studied abroad, you went to MIT doing city planning, architecture, urban planning, and then you went into some of the urban planning works in Malaysia. So when you connect the dots backwards, were there a few moments or experiences you think that shaped you for starting UrbanMetry?
Yeah, generally, I've done project management. I think I would call it project management for lack of a better word, right? Where I'm like jack of all trades for private and public projects. Public projects that I have to coordinate, I have to get people to say, understand the vision, just decide as a team what to do together. Just decision making as a team, right? And it was so hard, both in government and in private, both in organizations that are like hundreds and hundreds of people, and organizations that are like 5 people. It didn't matter. So I went from government to government-linked company, like Glicks investment companies, to private companies, like really small private companies. And it was surprising, but I thought the shrinking of the numbers would reduce the friction around communication. But it didn't as much as I thought, primarily because Southeast Asia, but also the way the industry works is the experience or the louder voice trumps. Like, how many years have you been in this industry? So the funniest thing is that when you do that, you keep doing the same thing. Because I've done this for 30 years, right? Okay. And then do we continue doing this for the next 30 years? And they're like, yeah. It's a very strange phenomenon to me when you know it doesn't work. So in my head, doing something over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity, right? But it was very difficult to convince people to agree, like on something that is, they know generally like what they should do, but you end up having the chairman just go to Switzerland, come back and say like, I saw this really nice river and we should do it. It's really no. So because of those kind of experiences, I think I got a little, I was young and then I was very frustrated. So I just realized that if you guys keep saying there's no data, I'm just going to give you the data. I'm just going to get it. And then now you can't say I have no data, right, to make these decisions. I think that was the main sort of motivation. And then it went down into this rabbit hole. And then now I have a company with 50 people in it and all kinds of healing challenges and ups and downs, right? Yeah, so I kept digging this hole. It gets deeper and deeper.
Wow.
Yeah.
I see. That's really interesting. And if you don't mind sharing, is there a ballpark figure of like the kind of revenues?
So I think for us, we definitely have it. We're in the millions, both US dollars and otherwise. The good thing is that we are profitable. So our B2B business is strong profit margins and profitable. So it is really a function of how do we look at the chimera of Southeast Asia, because we are not one country. For the longest time, people keep telling people like, oh, Southeast Asia is like large, like it's like United States, right? It's not. It's like a total lie, right? So there are 7. Have you watched Raya, the Disney movie?
It's
You
a
should watch
cartoon.
it.
No, I
Yeah, it's a
haven't.
cartoon. So it's actually about Southeast Asia, and it's about like how
Oh,
the countries are like broken down to the heart of the dragon and the head of the dragon, I don't know, whatever, and the tail of the dragon. We are like that. We speak different languages, we have different cultures, we have different nuances. And I think it is hard for B2C, but in B2C world, you have a good. I'm going to sell you this thing, fashion. I'm going to sell you this t-shirt, right? You get the t-shirt. The communication is different, but genuinely people buy about the same things. But when you do enterprise, I can tell you they're very different. The way you enter the enterprise, the things that they value as an enterprise partner is completely different. And even when they tell you no or yes, they can mean the other way around. Yes, but actually they mean no. Or no, they actually mean yes, but. So it's very different.
It sounds hard, I mean, for B2C and even harder for B2B, if I'm hearing you
Yeah.
correctly. How many markets are you in?
We are now in Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, if you count, and rural Japan. Why
Oh.
we say Singapore is because a lot of people in Johor are targeting Singaporeans, like to purchase houses in Johor. So we know a lot about Singapore. Like we have a
Yeah.
big database of it. But yeah, the land generally is in Johor.
I see. As a Singaporean, I've been hearing people wanting to buy land in Johor, even people my age wanting to go there and relocate.
If you're running a podcast,
Oh.
it sounds pretty possible, right? Yeah.
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 Maybe moving on to how you founded UrbanMetry. Yeah, you've had so many years in the industry, not having data to back up your assumptions and to back up your decisions. So walk me through the ideation to validation phase on before you went all in, right? Do you hold off the idea for a while, speak to people, work on it on the side? How do you find the conviction to go all in?
Honestly, it's been a while, so I'm just going to speak from memory. Some of this is maybe made up, just disclaimer,
Sure.
but no, I didn't make it. I was running, so I left corporate work and I started a consultancy actually before I dumped money into doing this. I basically started a consultancy called Urban Matters Solutions actually. So basically city, which is urban matters, right? And then solution. So anyway, it was like a one-woman show. I consulted for very boutique property developers, right? And I was just doing everything from like land acquisition to marketing to sales package, sales training, everything lah, like from going to the councils. That experience actually helped me actually fill up quite a lot of gaps. And at some point, I was even helping them do sales just to get the experience of why their goods moved. After doing all that, while I was doing all that, actually, I started this consultancy, this little consultancy of mine, which is a 1%. Then I started what we used to be called property price tag. So property price tag was supposed to be the data, because I didn't have data, right? So I wanted to get the data. And then we wanted to just make it democratic. So we wanted to give out, so the first business model is dumb. But the first business model was give out all the data, as many data as you can find, just give it out. And then we make money out of advertisement. So it's very similar it was very similar to Zillow in the US, right? So we were going to like give out all these houses. If you're a real estate agent, you can claim the house and blah, blah. So it's like data drives eyeballs and then we sell advertisement. Okay, completely died. Just to let you guys know, like it didn't work at all. I spent quite a lot of money doing it and fell flat in my face. I think the blessing in disguise was I am very good at cutting loss. And I'm
How much do you burn actually?
Oh, I can't remember honestly, but
I
it
see.
was painful. It was painful. It was a lesson learned. And honestly, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea at that time because everybody was doing it. Everybody was doing marketplaces, platforms. Like it wasn't so bad, right? But I think my biggest mistake at the time was I kept asking people in the industry, oh, do you want this? Do you want data? Of course, they all want data, right? But wanting it and paying for it is not the same thing. And in Southeast Asia, the number of people who were willing to pay for it was very small because they were all property people. Because it was also intangible as data, the kind of audience is just not very large, right? Yeah, so the good thing about me is that I'm not very afraid of admitting that I made a mistake or people make mistakes. I did this calculation wrong. And then in order to preserve capital to pivot, I cut half the team and I was like, no, I'm not doing this business anymore. It's not going to make me money. And I went down a rabbit hole actually. At first, when the advertisement thing didn't work, I was the first to do VR property sales. I even have I even had those VR goggles. I don't know if I should say this on a podcast, but we had this VR goggles and we filmed all these houses, walkthrough of these houses in 360. So if you
Wow.
Google property price tag, there's a panda that basically showcase how you can see the whole house with VR. VR, like
Very
you can see the
futuristic.
whole house. Yeah, this was in 15 or 16, I can't remember. But it's 10 years ago and we had all this, like we even had a mascot of a panda and he was like watching we filmed all these houses and we started
Yeah.
selling advertisements to direct to home buyer or home seller. So if you own the house, we would film your whole house. We would put it on our platform. People can walk through and you don't have to pay an agent. You sell directly. And we even had a concierge and the concierge had was able to answer phone calls, blah, blah, blah. So I went down this rabbit hole where I was like, yeah, I'm going to
Wow.
sell, I had these eyeballs, I'm going to sell advertisement packages. People were willing to pay us 1,000 ringgit, I think, which is like $250 for one advertisement. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, right? People are willing to pay me that. But then I realized that I made a huge mistake. My biggest mistake was everybody who paid me was selling these $1 million houses. And $1 million houses is very hard to move. Right? So they like the novelty of you can see the whole house, I don't have to open up the door. But who buys a $1 million house on VR?
Without looking at it.
Yeah, nobody, right? So it was funny because we had a few properties that was like 300,000, like really low level ones, like cheaper ones, and those flew off the shelf. Like we advertised and they got sold. We advertised, got sold. It was really cool.
Wow.
Homeowners were sending us flowers. They were so happy with us. Because they paid us so little money and they saved like thousands, right? They saved like 9,000 ringgit or something, and they paid us like hundreds, like maybe 500 ringgit. So they just like cashed in, sent us flowers, chocolates, right? But
Yeah.
I had 5 of those. Everybody else was $1 million because our business model was you have to pay us upfront. You pay us, we do the job, and it's not on success basis. We do the work and it's like advertisement, right? You pay. But a lot of the people he wasn't willing to pay. If you think about the real estate agents, right? They get paid only when they successfully sell. So the homeowner who actually listed never had to pay anything up front. So this actually psychologist, you procure the service and then you pay later was something that I completely missed out. Anyway, completely
How did you
died.
end up pivoting from a very consumer fun, that sounds like a property guru or like a 99 Co idea? How do you pivot all the way to what you are today?
No, okay, so then at that time, I went down this rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
And I realized it was a huge mistake because that was not my mission. My mission was to build better cities. My mission was to get these people to stop building this nonsense and really use the data
Yeah.
to build better, right? But I went down this rabbit hole because I built a platform. Because remember, I wanted to give out the data for free and people are more informed, so they would demand better things like free information flow lah. And then because people wanted something else, I went down the rabbit hole. Okay, this is what you want, and so I keep coming up with products that what they wanted, but it's not really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, I don't really want to do this. And so I like cut, and then I said, okay, no more B2C. Whatever remaining capital, I'm just going to go back to what I really want. I need to move the needle. I need to influence how these things gets built. And the B2C route was just very like obscure, not very direct, right? So we then, instead of investing in like building a B2C platform, we invested very heavily on building our database. So all the engineers for like the UI, like the consumer, the front end stuff got fired. I'm sorry if you are one of the people who got fired, but basically gone. And everybody was a data engineer or DevOps, like really like strong engineering guys. And we paid we retained or grew that engine, the data engine, and just got it. So then we went down, okay, this data is not clean enough. This data is not clean enough. I want this data. I want this. So we started to accumulate using the tech talent that we had to accumulate the data. And because I was one of those guys who wanted this thing anyway, so it was very easy for me to be immediately getting revenue. I go to a property developer, or I go to a bank, or I go to the government, and I'm like, I have this database. And like, yeah, let's do this, right? Because I was on the other side and I wanted it. So
Yeah.
it was very easy. But of course, it's not as sexy or my user is, I don't know, 10,000, whatever. But it is very long cycle. The immediate hanging fruits was the so there are people who immediately adopt, but then enterprises who are not so educated, then you have to spend time and effort to educate them. So the sales cycle is completely different for an enterprise.
Well, I'm very interested to hear how you started building the first few data sets with your data team. But maybe before that, how much money did you put into this business and how long were you going at it already? Do you think to get a more stable job or were you... I'm just wondering how you made those kind of financial trade-offs and how long that journey was before you pivoted into what it is today.
Okay, it's very difficult to answer. I think at that point, when we were properly price tagged, we were quite fortunate to have really good angel investors who didn't actually give me a lot of pressure. They just wanted me around to... they liked my work anyway. So a lot of times the trade-off is I have to do some consultancy work for them for free on the side, pick up the phone call when they call and say, Charlie, what do you think about this piece of land? That was the thing. And they make a lot of money out of that anyway, while I go crazy. So there was that. And then I think the money part was intense, but it was not like, I didn't pay myself like for a long time. I mean, I think there's two factors here. One, I am a woman, so I have the fortunate ability to leech off my husband for a while. He has a stable job. He has a stable outfit. I don't spend very much. I'm not a big spender. I have sins, but my sins are generally consumables. Some of the people's hearing is going to her consumables are a bit expensive, but yes, some of them are, but I think I have an option. So it's optional. It's not I have all this like debt. So it was okay. Lifestyle was something I never really upgraded, so it was not a big deal. But the obsession was very real. So the obsession was, I need to make it work. And I think the hard part, if you say that were there temptations to go back to corporate work, of course, there's always going to be like those down moments and you go, what am I doing? But I think it was not the money. I think a lot of it was, it's too hard. Right? This is really easy one. This very easy route. I just have to agree. And then the year-end holidays in Hokkaido, the flying around the world, the C-suite perks and the driver and like all those is just, you just have to agree. And then it's yours. So psychologically, it is seen as a refuge. So I think resisting that refuge is hard. But I don't think it was like, I'm lucky that it was not one of those things, if I don't do it, I'll run out of money to feed my family. So it's never one of those. But that's a function of the fact that don't upgrade your lifestyle. Sit in economy class. The moment you convert, you're done. Don't do it.
Wow. How long did you go without salary for?
I can't really remember, but it's a while. Yeah, and then I had to side hustle, like not from the company. So I had to side hustle and do other like stuff.
I see.
But more consultancy work to make sure that I can survive. But then I think,
You always knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur, like during your corporate life, or you were really just frustrated by this and decided to try it?
No, I'm not sure if I've always done. I've tried attempts. I've done pitches like before I started and I was working with corporate. I have done a lot of pitches and I have done, I don't always, this is what I want to do for my life. No, but it was more like, let's try this. It didn't work. Let's try it. It wasn't like so disappointing. Climbing up the corporate ladder was fine to me. Or even being a COO of somebody. So actually my dream job was to be a COO to a very, very strong CEO. That was my dream job. Because in my head, you never had to take full accountability of your decisions because somebody else is above you, right? You can always blame him or her. But at the same time, you're like, number two, right? So you get to do quite a lot of things and you get to make decisions quite a lot of things, but there's always somebody else to blame, right? That was my dream job, but that was my dream job. Yeah. So that one
Yeah.
you guys could consider. That sounds like a good deal.
Just to recap, you started property price tag. You started with ads. You laid off half the team, and then did a VR property software,
Yeah.
but decided to pivot into serving enterprises and governments. So you laid off a bit more of the team as well to focus on data.
Yeah. But
and
we
a
were
data
very
engineering
small
team.
lah. I won't say laid off lah. It was like
I see,
8
okay.
people.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
cut 2 or 3, so it wasn't very big. But
I
it
see.
was, yeah.
And
It was still a
were
decision.
Were you, I see. Were you a technical person in the sense of data, or do you how do you develop the first few data sets, given this wasn't a very publicly available? I mean, you were probably creating the first data set for your point of time. You were collating all of them, cleaning all of them. How did you manage to create the first models, and then how do you manage to bring this to your developers, governments, and banks, and get them to even believe in your models, right? Because they were probably, it's still in quite a scrappy stage, and not sure how well they were working back then.
To be very honest, this was done like almost a decade ago, right? Like 7, 8 years ago. I can count. I have a physics degree, but I was not a computer engineer, so I can't code. I can read the code, but I don't think I have the patience to actually sit down and code it. So it's not my character also. I'm more of like a theory person. So yeah, I can count, I can math, and I'm actually pretty good at what I do. So I think one of the things is that because I was in corporate, I was in the industry, I have network, I do have a reputation of what I could do. So a lot of people think that, I'm going to start UrbanMetry too. Yeah, sure. I'm sure, but it's not the data sets. It is the fact that you can, I think it's going to be more and more true, right? Like in the age of AI, it is the questions that you ask that is important. And I think it's the same with all my math friends, like my friends whose professional job is in mathematics, right? It doesn't matter the answer. It does matter, but like the answer is the easy part. It is the questions that you ask. And it's very difficult. Yeah, but I think it is very difficult to ask questions if you don't even know what you're trying to find out. So when the answer comes back, you actually don't know if it's correct. Industry experience is something that I think people like skip. They think it's irrelevant, AI can do everything. But the problem is AI actually cannot tell if something is good or we are in the right direction, because sometimes you have to ask a series of questions around the data. I think for me, when I first started, I knew all the questions. I just didn't have the tools to answer them. So it was not hard in a way for me to do it. And whenever I couldn't find the perfect data sets, for example, the Malaysian government at that time didn't publish racial distribution in a granular level. So one of the maps that UrbanMetry is very famous for is our Nasi Lemak index. So we actually track the halal and non-halal food establishment densities to know where the Muslims live or the non-Muslims live. Because we know exactly what we want to find out, the path to get there becomes easy, right? Yeah, so I think that's a problem I think today. A lot of people like they are building technologies and then finding an application for the technology.
Yeah.
Where else we are like exactly the opposite. We know what the problem in the industry is, and we are helping our clients solve it by giving them the technical ability to actually answer those questions. So most of our customers, when our business development meet them, the first thing they ask is, what is your problem statement? What do you want us to solve for you? What is it that you want answered? Then we will go and find the answer for you. It's not, hey, these are all the shiny things that we can do, because it doesn't give you value. It doesn't actually solve your problem. So we need to understand what is their problem and how can we get the data to answer their question? And then we'll go and
I see.
sign the information for them.
It
Most
sounds
of the
like
time, the information is with us already.
I see.
But we have to layer them together and do it.
It sounds like the discovery process was more of a collaborative one where you spoke to your clients and then figured out what they really needed to solve before going down to create some of these models. Was that
Yeah.
kind of the
Yes.
process that you took?
Yes.
Okay.
So most of the time, what we will do is, the funniest thing is that generally, clients do have the same questions. So once you answered like for one bank,
Yeah.
you will have the answers for many banks. So like it does, the questions do repeat themselves sometimes. But the fun part is when they do ask a question that you haven't heard before.
What kind of
Then-
questions do you hear in the early days, I guess? And what kind of interesting ones do you get to hear and try to discover?
So I guess the most recent one that we're really proud of is we did a piece for our bus network. So the question was, how do we increase bus ridership? Something quite, so now we know, okay, this is your goal. This is what you want to use the technology for. Then we have to find out the metrics on what does success look like? What does non-success look like? What's the range? Then we go down the rabbit hole with them of
I
the
see.
boundaries of what they can and cannot do. And then we assemble the data to power their model.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
It's very fun. It's very fun. When you get a very good problem statement, the team just lights up. Yeah.
wow. One thing you talk about is having a very smart team and of course a close team as well. Because it sounds like your projects are almost little research projects that you're doing. Sounds quite academic even.
Sometimes that's the really fun ones,
I
but we
see,
have to
I
make
see.
money, right? Actually, a lot of the stuff that we do is scalable. The good thing is that we solve, like I said, if we solve a problem statement for a bank, they generally
Yeah.
have very similar problem statements because they don't actually evolve very fast. You see where I'm coming from? So it's like if you have an elephant that doesn't have 2 trunks or 3 trunks every 5 days, generally your vaccine or your medicine works. For the same elephant, the next elephant, he moves very slowly, they evolve very slowly. So that's our advantage. But if you are
Yeah.
giving, B2C is like virus. Today it works, your vaccine works, tomorrow it evolves, then it doesn't work. So it's a bit like that. That's very
Yeah.
high iteration. For us, it's like you solve a very big problem, but then it doesn't change very much over the time. Yeah.
Do you mind sharing what's the kind of scalable problems that you're solving?
Okay, so one thing that we like to do is help clients, property developer clients, predict their sales. So we predict how many units of houses they can sell in where their land is, given the product that they are selling. So if you want to sell an apartment that's 500 square feet, this price, let's say 500,000. I'm making stuff up, okay? So let's
Yeah.
say
Yeah,
this
yeah.
location, 500 square feet, 5,000, $1,000 a square foot, so 500,000. We build models to tell you how fast can you sell your 500 units. Is it 1 month, 3 months, 12 months? And yeah, so we are judged by how accurate our predictions are.
I see. Do you have any
Because-
situations whereby it's not so accurate? Oh yeah, you're saying?
Yeah, so the fun thing is that for property developers, this means something very real. If I
Yeah.
hold too much inventory, it is interest rate. It's translated to actual dollars and cents. Okay, if I hold this for another 12 months, I might have a cash flow problem because I overbuilt. The market can only take
Yeah.
500 units, right? And I thought it could take 1,000. So I went ahead and launched 1,000 without market intelligence. And now I have 500 units unsold. That's a very big problem, right? Because the banks will go, hey, you have this 500 units sitting around. Like, what are you going to do with it, right? And that translates to money. So why do clients pay us so much money? Not because Charlie gives them transaction data. It's not, oh, she downloaded the data and cleaned it a little bit. It's not. It's the fact that when you use the intelligence properly, you actually save your cash flow. We're very happy because a lot of our clients, they have very low inventory.
Wow.
We are
So
also
it's
very
working.
picky with our clients. Yeah, we are very picky with our clients. We are expensive. because he makes sure they are very, very accurate. Because if it's not accurate, you're going to kind of say, you said I could sell 1,000 units. I have 800 sitting in my books. What are you going to do? It's really like that, right? So we do assess our clients. How we assess our clients, some of our clients actually, we know they're not going to listen to the numbers. Then we say, thank you very much. Because it's hard to go to a doctor and then the doctor runs an MRI or like a blood test and tells you, hey, you have really high sugar level. And then you go, I'll take my diabetic medicine sometimes. It's the person who you're working with. It's a relationship, right? So what we do, we are not even a doctor, okay? We are the MRI machine or the blood test machine. So I can give you the test result, which is that your blood sugar is high. The doctor will give you the medicine, do this. But if you don't follow, then it's very difficult, yeah.
Yeah, it's like creating a vitamin, but once you take it, you realize how good it is. I guess that's the experience of your clients as well. And you do serve some of the biggest clients in Malaysia, at least, when it comes to the development. So I guess
so
that's also how you charge.
Yeah. I think we are like the premium product of data analytics. There are platforms that's available, but I think what they do is very different from what we do. We predict your sales. They tell you, historically, this is the number of units that was sold. It's different, right?
Yeah. Were there any playbooks when it came to building a data product that was helpful?
I don't recommend any playbooks, primarily because I think the playbook is definitely an industry-specific one. So if you're in property, it's property. If you're in banking, it's banking. So the data play for each of this is more specific to the industry because the problems are different. I really don't recommend harvesting data and processing it. I think you could do that in the early 2000s when it's like the .com, everybody just scrape everything online and then like they had their own database. Yeah, no, we're 20 years down the road already. Sorry, cannot do that.
It sounds like it's a real combination of being in the weeds with your clients, but also creating something scalable alongside that allows you to deliver so much value as well. I'm just gonna move into a final question on the kind of the early days of UrbanMetry, which is the founding team. So I know you had a few founding team members initially. Some were part-time and ended up not working on UrbanMetry with you. Can you walk me through how you approach those difficult conversations with them, if difficult?
So one thing about me is that there are 5 founding values, which we only after 8 or 9 years wrote it down, because we read Stripe COO's Scaling People and we were like, oh shoot, we have to write it down. So like we wrote it down. And one of those key values that we have is trust. And our trust is slightly different from what people think of trust. So we will interview people. So it's one of those things that we use when we interview folks for cultural fit. And they think of it as, oh, do other people trust me? Am I trustworthy? I'm honest. No, that's not what we mean. When we say trust, it means that we are able to trust. Are you able to trust other people? So I think even in those difficult conversations, generally I take on the perception of no ill intent. Nobody has ill intent. Okay? It is not out of malice. That's where I start.
Yeah.
This person or I myself do not go into this conversation in ill intention. But just somehow that our goals or our vision or like what we think is best might not align or doesn't concur, doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So then we are honest about what is it that we want and then how best to achieve it for all parties. I think that's the premise that you come with. Then you can end very quickly, very well. Generally, I will say generally because I don't think I've achieved this 100%. I'm sure there are people out there who hates my guts. But it does happen with underperformers and stuff like that. And it's very hard, right? But generally, we've had folks who left the company, like a lot of our company events. We have ex-staff who just shows up. Hey, hi. So it's like whether they were founding or not founding, I think. But yeah, you just have to be very honest about what is it that you want and be very clear about it. And I think generally, if people with no ill intent, they will try to align those interests.
Yeah. Do you have any stories to share about how you approach some of these conversations with your co-founders? Because it is one of the most frequent ways where startups die, right? Is where they are not able to
Is
kind
it?
of
I don't know.
align with
I'm
their
not sure if I'm the
co-founders.
best person though. I've lost so many. And then I think I'm a solo founder, right? I'm
Yeah,
just left
yeah.
alone. So I don't know about like giving advice about.
And that's difficult, right? I mean, being a solo founder, it's typically not easy. Yeah, or they advise
It's
you to have co-founders.
it's really stupid, and not that I chose it. I guess nobody wants to work with me or could work with me, but whether some of my core team members like it or not, a lot of them have been around for 7, 8 years. So to
Wow.
me, they are as good as a founder. But I think psychologically, sometimes it is very difficult to have that title because the responsibility becomes extremely heavy. And sometimes I feel like it's not necessary to do that to them. But other than that, I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if the titles do matter, like in terms of commitment to the company, but I think there is like a reverse sort of responsibility that could be very heavy. Yeah.
Wow.
But
It almost
I don't
sounds
know.
as if you would rather not put that kind of responsibility on others. Like I know companies who hire engineers and then promote them to like co-founding engineers, or even companies out there who just started out and then they hire initial members and just throws around or gives out the title of co-founder just to like motivate people more. But it almost sounds as if your approach is slightly different towards that.
I don't know. I think if the person like really likes titles, they can't work here. I don't think the kind of I don't know. I don't think the challenges and the tenacity that's required is going to be compensated by a title. Yeah, working in UrbanMetry is not easy. Everybody tells me that. And I think if you go to our glass door, they'll tell you this is
It's okay.
no easy. It's not the easiest way to cruise by, right? I don't think anybody who comes to the company and says, hey, I want to join because she gave me a co-founder title, won't last 5 minutes, man.
Everyone has to be mission driven and truly care about what you're doing there, regardless
I
of
don't know
title in
about
that sense.
truly care about what you're doing. I think it's more they need to have the self-confidence beyond the title. It's not the same thing, right? Yeah. The self-confidence that's required to do what we do goes
Yeah.
beyond your title.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. That's very interesting. Because I think sometimes I hear about how running startups is a way to do things that you're definitely not really qualified for, but you have to do it anyways. I'm not sure if you are
Exactly.
kind of touching on that, but
Yeah. So you need to like just go and do, and that's every day.
yeah. And I think quite a bit of advice I've been getting as someone early in my career is don't focus on titles, but focus on learning early on in career, because titles are not quite performative in that sense.
It really depends on what are the goals. I think for people, I think for some people, the titles are really important because they use it as stepping stones for their next. It's like part of their resume. Oh, I checked this box, and then I checked this box, and then I checked this box, and then I fulfilled all my boxes, bingo, and then it goes to the next one, right?
Yeah.
I think it serves its purpose. Titles do help when you're trying to assess how much contribution or how important this person is in the organization. And sometimes it's helpful within the organization because people realize in your tribe where are the key cogs, and these are the people that you rely on to keep it moving, right? And it is a certain level of recognition of like
Yeah.
where they are in the tribe. But I think beyond that, it doesn't do very much. So it is quite temporary lah.
Moving on to how you've been scaling UrbanMetry, you raised $2 million in USD in 2022 from Monk Hill Ventures for
Yep.
product development and BD. How do you decide to get venture funding, and what was that process like?
So I've known Monks Hill for a number of years. I really like what they do and had several conversations with the general partners. Tough part about being a solo founder, especially when you're in the risk business, is you swing from overthinking the risk to underthinking the risk, right? So it's hard to gauge because you're literally talking to the mirror and go, Charlie, is it a good idea? Yeah. No. No, it's talking to the mirror. So it's not great. So I wanted folks who's on my side, who think through things with me, and intellectually I have to respect, right? So I think that combination itself was really hard to find. But of course, Monks Hill is one of the smartest VCs you can find in Singapore. That intellectual sort of like chemistry was very hard to find. And when I met them, they basically told me that what we have is like a chest full of trust that enterprise and government, etc., that we have built a chest full of trust in the data that we have. It is time to see what else it can do. So the scalability of that trust and how do you scale that? My previous failure with B2C was not like great. So there is that sort of like shadow already, right? So then you needed to get people who are more experienced and or who understands this space a little bit more to harvest what we have and make it better. So I think a lot of the motivation was that because at that time UrbanMetry was already profitable. But is it scalable? Yeah, I could go international. We were like 20 plus people already. So it wasn't like we don't know what we were doing, or it's not like that. It was already growing as an enterprise business. But we know we could do more. We know that there's a lot to unpack, but I needed like some help, like with thinking through the full potential of the product. So we decided that we were ready emotionally and financially to take on the challenge. So that's when we took the VC money.
Yeah. And in a sense, it's kind of like rocket fuel to scale your company to the next level.
Yeah.
You've been scaling into things such as home loans and also solving the problems of like vacant homes.
Yeah.
Would this be part of that growth ambition? And how do you manage to stay true to your mission at the same time with these factors in play?
So our main mission is to build better cities, right? So we've arguably done quite a lot of it, and a lot of people are very surprised. And I remember a mentor telling me that I was crazy. And then 5 years later, she was like, wow, you're really crazy because you actually did it, right? So you actually sold a product that I thought nobody would buy, because a lot of like property developers, they pride themselves with that the experience is unique to themselves, right? And then now I've digitized it, I quantify it, and sometimes people see that as it doesn't align with their own self-belief and their own self-reflection, right? The fact that I sold something like that was already surprising. Then we were like, okay, that moved the needle. We were able to prevent some terrible constructions. We were able to prevent or lower down quite a lot of inventory, right? So people had fewer unsold stock, etc. But then if you stare at the numbers, I still have 1.9 million vacant houses. You stare across the border from Singapore to Johor, I have like 30,000 units of empty units, right? So then you start to think, can we do more and can we do it faster? So that's when we realized that we need to move the needle by having a stake in these vacant houses. We need to have stake in the control, like how this stock moves. So I think that's why we started off dipping our toes again into the B2C segment. And we are basically triangulating in a way, we're still a data company, right? So we are still collecting data, but we're collecting something a little bit more intimate, right? With the home loans, so when I say intimate, we're still on the no private data. So no personal data collection. We don't collect any personal data. So we took a long time building a home loan application tool for our banks that doesn't take your personal data. So we encrypt everything. But we can see approval trends. We can see, are we locking some people out of mortgages? Are we over extending mortgages for some people? So that's sort of market, like the loan market data that we want to see. And truth be told is that even this level of data and detail is not visible even to our regulators, right? So we see that as an opportunity to see the macro movements with a bigger slice without actually having your personal data exposed. So we were going for debt level, loan level data.
Yeah.
Then we also realized that there is a lot that we don't know about the asset that's beyond where it's located. Is it near the MRT station, blah, 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 blah. So a lot of times when people think about how much is an asset worth, they think, oh, this one has how many square feet? Okay, this is in this neighborhood. I compare it with the neighbor. Is it near like the train? Is it near, I don't know, whatever. Is there like a flood happening? So our 50 data layers is able to assess that asset externally. So I'll know, is there going to be flood? Is there a train that's going to come by? But I know very little about the asset itself, like inside. How well is it maintained? Has it been renovated? Is there soil issues? Do they have solar panels? How much energy does it use? That level of data. To us, that data is definitely monetizable because as we move towards climate change, we will have a situation where we need to know how energy efficient our homes. We're not talking about it here in Southeast Asia or Asia yet, but in the US, in Europe, in Australia, people are already rating houses by how energy efficient they are. And we don't have that data today. So I saw it as, how can I string these things together on top of all the layers of data that I have? I sound like a data obsessed person. I'm a little bit So I'm building these things, but trying to also fulfill multiple goals at the same time. I want to fill up these vacant houses. At the same time, because I'm a co-owner, I now have a trust relationship with my co-owner to share some of these data around like electricity use, soil conditions, renovation plans with me. What we are actually trying to do is translate the data that we have to a trust ecosystem. And that trust ecosystem is something that we are building on top of the trust ecosystem I already have, right? So data is now no longer like a thing, right? Because data depreciates. But it is the continuous flow of that pipe of data and the mechanism of that data that is what we are building. So
I see.
Yeah, so this is like part. There's another product coming out also, which is part of the trilogy
I see.
of what we're building. And we're very excited because if the pipes flow properly, you will get a really interesting mix that unlocks a lot more potential, I think. So we were staying on the surface. Now we're trying to go, I guess, one micro level down onto the S. Was this built in concrete? So some of the houses that we have been financing, I won't say finance, but we are co-owning with folks, right? They were built in 1960s, 1970s. They've completely already used up all the carbon, right? The carbon emissions is literally zero. You're not pouring in more concrete, no more cement, right? You're spending maybe about like 10 tons of carbon dioxide to fix the roof, the wiring. I want to ask you, do you think two houses, one that's built completely new, okay? You're pouring in structure for the rooms, bricks. Would it have a lower carbon footprint than an old house?
No, it'll be much higher for sure.
Yeah, it will be much higher, right? Should they enjoy the same interest rate?
Oh. Hopefully not in the future.
Yeah, but it is now. Why is it now? It's now because you can't differentiate them. On the books in a bank, they look exactly the same. We all talk about all this like carbon, scope 1, scope 2,
Carbon
scope 3.
taxes
Right?
and all.
Yeah, but actually a lot of it is not really powered by actual measurable data. If you audit them, a lot of them will panic.
And then a lot of it is still for show today. So that's a really exciting future.
Yeah, I don't want to say that because some of them are my clients, but I'm just saying that there is all this need that there's going to be this like requirement for proof, requirement for money to flow, that it takes time to build these data sets.
I see. Wow, that's really interesting and looking forward. Hopefully that works out in the future. Maybe one last thing on scaling up. Has there been any helpful tactics for scaling up your sales teams, reaching out to different markets and different kind of sub verticals within this industry as well?
Yeah, so we used a very old book called by Miller Heiman, New Strategic, it's not new anymore, New Strategic Sales Framework. It's really good. I recommend reading it if you're doing enterprise sales. I recommend reading it with your team, both bosses, everybody in the company that is touching the sales process, including the CEO, should read it together with the team. So then you have a common language of how to address different problems. It just makes communication a lot faster. So then you're not, every single client is like a new thing. They are not. There are easy ways to dice up all your problems and smoothen out your sales process so that you can support your team better. I think the most important thing is that a lot of bosses, they are very bad at supporting their team because they are not understanding, they're not understanding the juniors' problems fast enough. So I think, a framework such as these will help you with the language, using the same languages, and helps with speeding things up.
What have you managed to adopt so far? I guess in terms of, communication seems to be a big one as well.
Yeah, so definitely now we adopt a framework. I can actually see every single client. If they close, why they close. If they didn't close, why they didn't close. And I don't have I don't know, the client didn't like us. That's not helpful, right? So we need to actually know exactly what did they not like about us, or what did they like about us? Why did we win this job so fast? That is also cause of suspicion if it goes too smooth. Yeah. Oh, did you really make sure that the client understand what they're buying? Because that's quite important, right?
Have there been any, I don't know, things
Oh,
that,
yeah.
before that you kind of messed up? Sure.
Also, we had customers who assume that's what they're buying, and then they get the delivery and say, this is not what I want, and then they refuse to pay. So I think the fault there lies with the salesperson, right? So the salesperson didn't get the cue that the client didn't understand what he's buying. And it causes a lot of friction and disappointment, right? Because when you deliver, it's not what you deliver. It's just not, people are just not happy. So we have to make sure. So when it closes too fast, you have to be very, very suspicious. If it closes slow, it's okay. If you don't close, it's also okay. But if you close very fast, you have to be suspicious. Yeah.
I see. That's interesting. Maybe moving on to our next section on like technology. So as a CEO, how do you decide what kind of technologies to invest in to stay competitive?
There's two parts of technology, okay? I'm like the strategic person. So I would understand the basics of certain types of technology. And then I would go, is it worth further investigation? Does this ideas have legs, right? So very conceptual type. So automation, switching processes to a new processes, like that kind of not really tech type of understanding. So I participate a lot there. But I don't, I do participate in discussions around ethics, methods, integrity around the data. The data side, I do participate quite strongly in. Tech, like DevOps tech or maintenance of the database, etc. Honestly, I just trust the team. They run it. Fortunately, I do have a physics degree. The nice thing is that when they BS or they try to like funny, not in a non-integrity way, but like maybe trying to skip some steps, right? And then you go, like, really, right? But one of my proudest moments, what I really like about the team is that they make a really strong argument. So they know how I function and how I work, and they generally will come with 3 options. And an option that they really want me to choose. And I only check for soundness of reasoning. And if the reasoning sounds sound, then sounds like the way to go. So I don't micromanage that way.
Wow,
So in a
that's
way,
really nice.
do whatever they want. All I care is that it works. And yeah, and I check for working. It is your math exam. You just check for working and it looks about right.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that's it.
So it's really about understanding the purpose and the outcomes rather than so much getting into the actual details of the code and knowing
Yeah, just
how to
if
build
you
it.
if your communication of what is your true north, what is it that you're trying to achieve as a team is very clear. These things become something that you have to trust them to decide.
Do you have any North Star metrics that you rely on to make
Sales?
your decisions?
Sales is a very important one. I suggest it to entrepreneurs. Yeah, definitely sales. I think general productivity, we also measure productivity and we measure, so depending on the product, it's quite product specific.
Yeah.
Things that leads
Yeah.
to sales lah, basically. The targets. We determine our targets and then we go. Depending on which product, we would, but obviously everything has to be aligned to the company's budget and CC. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, are there any trends or innovations that excite you most in urban planning and data science? And maybe if all goes well, what do you hope for the future of cities and urbanization?
I
in
think
the
one
next
of
decade?
the exciting things is, I guess there's 2 things that I'm really excited about. Language was a very big problem, I think, for most of urban planners around the world. And the language barrier and jurisdiction and boundaries and the legal complexities of different countries makes people nervous about adopting best practices. So for example, if I see some sort of financing mechanism in India for buses, right? And then I get really nervous about implementing it here in, I don't know, in Sarawak, for example, like in Kuching. Because I have very little understanding of what are the legal differences, what are the clearance, like how possible it is for them to take that. The good thing is AI can do that now. AI, if you feed the documents, as just the legal documents into AI, and then you ask the right questions, it explains to you. This is a very simple thing. Tell me the differences and similarities between these 2 plans. And the thing does it. Is it 100% correct? Probably not. But it's a lot faster to understand whether you want to invest time to even go to the next 2 steps. Right now, I think the thinking is it's too hard. I have to invest too much to understand this entire process or entire document. Because government documents are very thick, right? I have to invest all that, then figure out the similarities and differences before I go a step further. With AI today, you can just do that. And genuinely, it might not be 100% correct. And the good thing is that they are not 100% correct, right? Then you can still, but it gives you like a general judgment on, is it worth my time to further the agenda?
Yeah.
And that's very exciting to me. Because
What's the second one you mentioned as well?
So I think the second one is the reduction in cost in gathering data for government sector. So for the longest time, the amount of like data that's required to build a lot of these models is so cost prohibitive that it's only available to developed nations. Things like microstations, micro-weather stations, or even understanding road networks, right? People spend millions of dollars or billions of dollars sending people onto the ground and to measure. You don't have to do that anymore. It's quite amazing, actually.
Who's doing it?
So you can do it in the combination. I don't know if you've seen it, but the remote sensing, like all the amount of details that you can see on satellite now,
Yeah.
you can literally see like elevation down to like 0.3 meters, like a feet.
Wow.
It's really amazing. Like the resolution that you can get. And I think the number of satellites that we have combined with the ability to use AI to actually say, okay, this is a road, this is not a road, this is a what kind of road. You just really reduce the cost of data for developing countries. But of course, data collection cost goes down. Doesn't mean data analytics is going to go down. So the four processes around data, the data space is data collection, data analysis, data decision making, and then data actions. So you have to take action at the end, right? Like database actions. Database, so if you think of it as aircon, okay, let's say temperature of a building. Data collection is like your sensor. Oh, it is 27 degrees. That's data collection. Data analysis is, 27 degrees is above or below the normal temperature. Is it, usually we set it at, the normal is 24, and now you're above 24. Okay. I know I'm simplifying it, but basically that's what it is, data analysis. Then data decision making is, you decide that you have to do something about it. That means, I need to reduce it to 24 on whatever logic, right? Either you decided that I had to go to the median, then you decide I will move it to 24. Then data action is you control the machine, which is your air condition, to change it to 24. So those are the four stages of data decision making. We are nowhere near decision making. We are at data collection and maybe analytics. I say maybe because anything after analytics has politics in it. So I'm only focusing on the first two.
I see. It's too hard to affect what's going on in the cabinet, I guess. Maybe just moving on to some reflections you've had. What keeps you motivated during tough times? I think you mentioned how difficult entrepreneurship can be sometimes as well.
I think expecting that you're always motivated in itself is wrong. I think you are up sometimes, you're down sometimes. And I think the whole point is that there will be really difficult days. So a lot about being an entrepreneur is actually self-regulation. It's a very sort of meditative process. During really hard days or hard periods, I have resorted to biohacking a bit. When I say biohacking, it doesn't mean that I put like stuff in my body. It means things like force myself to wake up at 7 in the morning and jump into the swimming pool and then do a cold swim for an hour or half an hour. It means making myself sleep at 10:30 at night. So a lot of these things is just very uncomfortable to do, very difficult to do. You do them. You do
And
them.
typically, I guess you don't sleep at 10:30. Like that's considered early, right?
Yeah. So you do. So days that it's like really hard. For me, I try to control the thing that I can control, which is myself. So I start with myself again, and then once I feel like I'm in control, then I start to expand the thing and work on the things that I have control. So I guess rule 1 is don't panic. And rule 2 is just keep going. And I think I find it very interesting that younger people talk about being motivated as in like it's external. How do you stay motivated? Like something like, what do you do externally to cause you to be motivated? I find that a very strange concept because
Extrinsic more than intrinsic.
No, I just feel like there's always like tipping a little bit too much to the I am a function of my environment versus you have agency over, you have actually control and accountability and responsibility of how your day goes, right? And I think it's interesting because I see it as Google searching. When you search, it's intent. I have intent to search for something. But when you're on Facebook, or you're on Instagram, you're being pushed information, right? So you're passive. Yeah, so if you're passive, you cannot be an entrepreneur. I'm sorry. Give up.
That's really helpful. I think having high agency and when you don't, then I think that also leaves a lot of room for emotional deterioration. So Oh, okay. Maybe moving on to just being a female entrepreneur and a mother. What kind of difficulties what kind of difficulties and opportunities have you experienced, and how have you navigated some of that?
Okay, the opportunity is running a company is very much like being a parent.
So you're
And so
running two
if
companies?
no, I just have a lot of kids. Sorry. No, I'm just kidding. I think running the parenthood thing was good. So my kids are older, like 10, 12. I actually started the company after my second one was born, like a few weeks after my
Wow.
second one was born. I think the heartaches that you have as a parent is very similar to running a company. Dealing with HR issues is very similar to the siblings fighting. So there's a lot of there's a lot of comparables, right? I would say that motherhood was practice to run a company, almost, except that you can't fire your kids. So that's slightly different. But other than that, I think, and you don't recruit, right? I guess you get a dog.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so I think there are some differences, but I think it has done more for me than otherwise, right?
That's very interesting because people my age would think that they want to get their career in check before kind of starting a family. Because when you're young, you have no responsibilities. So it's a lot easier in that sense. But I guess what you're saying is even parenthood teaches you so much.
Okay, still, I think being a parent was the hardest thing I ever done. But I think, like, even more than running a company, yes, I agree. I just think that it is so similar that in my head, it is so similar that if you think that running a company is less responsibility, it is not. You can be completely narcissistic and think of your team as your labor. You can take that approach, I guess. But I'm not very sure how far you can take it.
Wow. That's really food for thought. I mean, I just got married this year. I don't have kids, but it's very good food for thought. Yeah. Maybe one last question on reflections. Like, what has helped you grow most throughout the years scaling with UrbanMetry?
Failure.
Action, like your own actions and failures.
I think in general, failure. You grow the fastest when you fail the fastest. And you fail often.
I'm just going to move on to our rapid fire round. There's about 10 or 11 questions here that I'm just going to ask, and then you can just feel free to respond however. So the first one is, what's your favorite piece on the cello? I know you play the cello. So just going to ask this one.
I'm boring. I play all the Ghibli themes. So my favorite is House Moving Castle's main theme.
Nice. Have you watched The Boy and the Heron? I mean, there's a new Ghibli movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I did
I just
watch
watched
it.
that. Yeah. That's nice.
Oh.
What's 2 or 3? Yeah, what's 2 or 3 books you recommend most to other people?
Most.
I recommend it,
Okay,
I guess, in
so
general. Yeah.
I think my current favorite book is Kaiju Preservation Society. I don't know if you heard it. It's a pop song, basically. It's pretty good.
Huh.
People didn't like it. Some of my friends didn't like it, but I quite liked it. It's a laugh out loud type of book. Recently, I liked The Righteous Mind, I think by Jonathan Haidt. If I say his name properly. Interesting. I think it's good for marketing. I think really pretty good book. The third one is I'm a sci-fi person as well. So I like the Octopus second book. Can't remember the name of the title, but it's
What's the
basically
series?
about, let me just look it up.
Okay, sure.
It is Children of Time. Children of Time.
Okay. Wow, very diverse.
Like one of
books.
the best evolution sci-fi out there.
Oh, wow. Very, very diverse and interesting list. It's interesting. Jonathan Haidt's one of my favorite psychologists, but Righteous Mind is probably more of a moral psychology book than a marketing book, right? But
Arguable, yeah. But
okay, yeah. Interesting. Give us a film or show that you enjoy, if any.
House Moving Castle.
What's a podcast maybe that you enjoy or that you listen to?
I just recently had one. I think it's called What Now by Trevor Noah. Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just heard that. Pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the favorite meal that you have?
Favorite meal? Nyonya laksa.
Oh. What's something people often get wrong about you?
I don't know, I'm very transparent.
Is there anything you wish people asked you more about often?
For help,
If you weren't an entrepreneur, what would you be doing?
carpenter.
Just one small everyday moment that brings you joy.
Sitting,
And what's the one thing you're most grateful for right now?
my husband.
Oh, that's really nice. So I guess just to wrap it up, how can listeners find you and be helpful to you?
Yeah. Check out our LinkedIn page. I'm most active on LinkedIn, probably useless anywhere else. I don't check my email. Please don't email me. Yeah, LinkedIn, and with LinkedIn, WhatsApp, I guess that's mode of reaching out.
Okay, you don't have to give your WhatsApp number, so yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks so much for speaking with me, Charlie. Really appreciate it.
Most welcome, Eric. Hope this was helpful.
Thanks so much for listening to the Sow and Scale podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tan. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment, follow it in your favorite podcasting app, leave a review, and share it with your friends. You can also join our WhatsApp group where you can provide me with feedback and chat with like-minded individuals, or subscribe to my Substack where I post about business and entrepreneurship. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, and see you on our next one.